I don't think I've ever been this qualified to speak about a topic. So, let's talk about stupidity, shall we? Cheers. Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about something book adjacent. And today, I want to talk about something that's been annoying me for a while. See, a couple of weeks ago, Bookborn published a video called "Do Science Fiction Authors Think We're Stupid Now?" And Stephen Arion kind of replied asking, "Are readers getting stupid?" And I watched both videos. They made me incredibly angry. It took me about a month to come up with a reply, and here we are. This is not going to be a full reply to their arguments. That's kind of hard. I may come back to at least one of the reasons or one of the arguments they make later. But today I want to ask a bit of a question here as well. Or, well, I'm going to give answers because I hate that, like, I'm just asking questions part here. But I'll link both videos down below. You can go watch them. I have never interacted with either booktuber. This is not an attack on them. I think there's just something that we need to talk about. And, well, with that, let's go. So, Bookborn's video starts with the experience she recently had by reading the Hugo winners of the last decade, or of the 2010s, and her assertion that those are rather direct in their messaging, which leads her to ask, well, are all books getting more and more simplistic, more direct in their messaging, and so forth? And then a whole lot of arguments about a character that is pronounced Roland Barthes, no matter what she says, and, blaming the internet, because of course we blame the internet. I will not go down that route, at least not today. Today I want to look at the question, whether it's wrong, which it is, and why people may even ask that question. So, here we go. Science fiction has always been preachy. That's the first point that we need to acknowledge. Also, we need to look at, are the Hugos a good measurement of, trends in science fiction and fantasy, and what authors in science fiction and fantasy do? So let's start. The Hugos are not representative, or at least not representative for general trends in science fiction and fantasy, especially not in sales trends, and thus more what like publishers are looking for. That's just not the case. The Hugos are voted on by the members of a World Science Fiction Convention. This year, this one will be in Glasgow. So it's a very small group of people that gets to vote. They need to be members of the World Science Fiction Association, well, no, society, not association, and members of the Worldcon. That's at least $50 that you need to pay to vote. That's a small group of people who will vote for these authors, active convention goers, and so forth. A very specific form of hardcore fans of the genre are voting for the Hugos. So at most, the Hugos are a sign for what is going on with the hardcore center of science fiction fandom at the moment. If you want a more general approach, I suspect, no matter what we say, the Goodreads Awards might be a better sign. If you want to know what very specific critics think, there are other awards. Take, for example, In Ascension, a book that came out last year by Martin McInnes, which got longlisted for a Booker Award, which is not necessarily known for having what you might call sledgehammer fiction as its priority, but those are curated awards with a jury. So now that we've settled that the Hugo Awards are not necessarily a good measurement for what science fiction in general is doing these days, let's look at both the Hugos and science fiction over the last couple of years, or decades. See, I looked at what kind of books won Hugo Awards, and one of the first was the Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein, which is well known for its nuanced takes on the military, voting rights, and so forth. I'm kidding. It's propaganda. Same goes for The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein, which is also fairly direct in its libertarian message. Another book that won a Hugo was The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin, which is a fantastic book, and you should definitely go and read it. But it's also not exactly subtle with its messages around gender and gender roles, is it? Further books that won these awards are The Diamond Age by Neil Stevenson, which is, once again, fairly direct in its messaging. Orson Scott Card, famed master of nuance, subtlety, and never-ever agenda in his fiction, also won a couple of those Hugos. No, the Hugo Awards have always had phases in which they did reward fairly clear-cut, what you might call science fiction with a very direct social or socio-political message. Beyond, obviously, the question, can you even write science fiction without a political message? But, my point is the perception of book-born or possibly Stevenarian is skewed when they assume that science fiction and fantasy that got awarded and was popular in the last decade was more preachy than other science fiction, was more direct in its messaging than other science fiction. That's just not true. There may be, and this is the maximum we can get out of this, a need for science fiction and fantasy with clear-cut messages within a specific part of the science fiction and fantasy community, that being the part that is invested enough in the genre to pay the fees that are necessary to read through all the material that is kind of attached to it to vote for the Hugos. So the question that I want to ask and then answer, and where I want to go with this is, why do people nevertheless think that science fiction has gotten more preachy, as Stevenarian would call it? And this is where it gets political. So let's look at the first part of this. I have 3 questions and then I have an answer. The first part is like, why are we thinking this? And here we need to talk about something. See, at the beginning of the video, Bookborn claims that she does agree with the messaging of these books that came out in the 2010s that won these Hugo Awards. So the question is, what kind of political background do you have if you agree broadly with the ideology, or whatever you want to call it, the messaging of these books? Well, I would call it slightly progressive, mildly progressive or liberal. Because these books are all about, the environment should probably be saved. People with different skin colors should probably have the same chances and should be respected. And people with different gender identities and sexual orientations are cool. So it's pro-gay, anti-racist, pro-environment, roughly. So what you might call sensible liberal positions. Why, however, do people object to the directness of the message? So here's something we need to understand, and that is that liberals do espouse these positions, but don't want to get involved. It's part of the tenets, like, is to be smart, to be out there, to have the right values, but don't get muddied and dirtied in what you might call politics. Politics is obviously everywhere, so this is a misapprehension, but that's sort of where we are. It's like, yes, I'm fine with the gays, just don't show them to me all the time. Yes, I know the planet is burning, just don't tell me all the time. It's that kind of messaging. Now, the next part is that a lot of these positions, that, were already pretty much accepted and mainstream in most politics in, say, the West for a while. What then happened is the fascists, we call them fascists around here, what you might call the populist right-wing Christian right, tried and successfully, unfortunately, shift the Overton window and shift discourse and question these messages, these ideas again. And this is where we are right now. Suddenly, being gay is no longer something that is accepted, because the discourse has been shifted so far, which means a message that is fairly clear about gay acceptance, queer acceptance, trans acceptance, and so forth, suddenly feels like an angry political statement. The existence, and this is the sad part here, the existence of trans people, the existence of queer people, the existence of non-white people has suddenly become a political statement again. And mildly defending these positions suddenly feels like in-your-face preachiness, because the discourse has been shifted back again to the right, which is a problem. Let's be facing this clearly, right? So this is the first part. So why do people think that science fiction has gotten more preachy? It hasn't. It's just that that the things that are sort of in these books have suddenly become the center of discourse again. So they feel more like political statements than they were originally meant, because the right, the fascist Christian right, has pulled them back into discourse. It's taking, well, it's why we call them reactionaries. It's rolling back discourse here. And suddenly these are embattled positions, which feels uncomfortable for those of us who don't want to engage in discourse and combat in the political arena, which is a privilege if you don't have to. So we start there. Let's move on to the next part. And that is the language here. Why are we talking about stupidity? Both Stephen Arion and Bookborn ask the question and using the phrase stupidity, which I think once again boils back down to this form of respectability here. See, intelligence, and stupidity is obviously a term in the intelligence discourse, right, has been used to, well, stratify society. We talk about people that are less intelligent, often in a biological terminology, which is borderline racist, oftentimes fully racist. Just go read the bell curve if you feel that. Don't do it. It sucks. It's Nazi propaganda. Point is, discourse about intelligence always kind of falls down that arena. We are still using the term, though, because it's shorthand and it has been around for a while. But what both Stephen Arion and Bookborn then do is shift it slightly to concerns about critical thinking, where they're moving it about, like, it's about subtlety, it's about nuance that is in books and supposedly no longer in the kind of books that are popular. And this, once again, still preserves those stratifications in society, these distinctions, these class distinctions, because while it is no longer about mere biology, now it is about education, now it is about intellectualism. We have a shift in language that preserves the hierarchy, though. And that is, I think, the dangerous part here, because I feel it's easy to fall down that trap. Because here's the thing. Most people out here in science fiction fantasy land that we are usually talking with are mostly white, mostly middle class, mostly fairly conventionally presenting. We're already part of the elites. A lot of these privileges have been slowly eroded over the last decades, which is good. But the intellectualism is sort of still baked in that, because intellectualism and education are class privileges. We still have them, sort of. We try to sort of dampen that impact because we feel it's wrong to think that we're better because we're smarter, because that's, obviously racist. So we claim we're better because we are able to think more critically, which is still the same thing. So that part of discourse is, I feel, falling into a trap set by class distinction, the need to preserve privilege and our elitist status by shifting the dialogue from mere biology into intellectualism. But we're still not above using the word stupidity because it gets clicks. I understand that part too. I just think it's very dangerous and potentially harmful to use terms like stupidity to sort of build the case that a book that does both sides in an argument, that does not have a clear-cut message, is somehow dangerous for or not helpful with critical thinking. Here's the thing, though. You can read the Communist Manifesto, famously nuanced pamphlet. You can think critically about that. Critical thinking is not married to having texts that show all arguments. That's not how that works. In fact, you need your critical thinking skills to read texts with clear-cut messages, to still question them. That's kind of the point, isn't it? So here I feel that the question of, like, why are we using stupid is clickbait on the one hand, and on the other hand, our need to preserve some form of class distinction while trying to avoid the sort of racist undertones of talking about actual biology of intelligence, which is bullshit. We should not fall down that trap. There is room for nuanced books, and there is room for more direct messaging, and they're going to be published all at the same time. It's what we personally choose and what we personally enjoy. And this brings us to the third question. He's like, so who's to blame? What's going on? And I think this is sort of where we need to look. See, the first part is, do science fiction writers think we're stupid? Obviously not. Well, some may, but that's a personal problem. However, maybe the people asking the question here are somewhat part of the problem. Because, see, if these books may have more queer authors, may have more queer and more non-white, non-Western, more environmentally concerned themes in there, then maybe they are written for people who want that right now. Obviously, these people are here. So if we are claiming that More clear-cut messages, more direct messages in fantasy and science fiction are bad, which is sort of the underlying claim of a lot of these videos, right? We're basically blaming the people who need that right now, who want that right now. And this, I think, is the problem. See, we want representation in our books, but right now, what we're basically doing when we're building the argument that books that are pro-queer, that are pro-trans, that are pro-environmental protection and so forth, books like that are bad. We're blaming the people who want those books. And that's where I get so angry about I just don't want to make a claim. I just want to start a discussion. I'm just asking questions part of these videos recently, because these questions make you complicit, because there is someone who doesn't want to have these messages out there. And that's the fucking fascists out there on the right. And I assume no one wants to be part of their crew. I ideally hope so. And that's why I'm so mad about these videos. Is you're basically throwing the people under the bus who want these books and making yourself part of a team that you don't want to be part of by claiming that, you know, these books are bad for your critical thinking, that they are not helpful, asking the what about the queer children question and so forth. I don't think anyone wants that, but I think it's important to understand where the discourse has shifted, how the discourse has shifted, and how we may be complicit if we are upset about too many gays in one specific book, for example. So, what's the solution to all of this? It's what I would call to fantasize with the hammer. Now, hear me out. I think there's 3 reasons why we need fiction that has clear-cut messages right now, why we need fantasy that is direct in its messages. I think there's 3 reasons. Reason 1. Fantasy, as I've been often reminded, is supposed to be escapism. Now, escapism is what we want when we're fed up with the world right now. And if you are non-white, if you are pro-environmental protection, if you are queer or a queer ally, you don't have a good time right now on the internet because, well, look at social media. Discourse has shifted. You're under constant attack from the right all over the place. Your basic human rights are in danger. They're constantly attacked. You may even have like serious bodily, physical consequences out there in the real world. It currently sucks to be in any way not what the Christian fascist right wants you to be. So you might just really need some escapism. Some books that have clear-cut messages that tell you that you're all right. And I think this is the first and most important reason why we need these kind of books. There are people out there for whom these books could be life-saving, could be at least soul-soothing. And that's a good thing. Unambiguously. The second part is, a lot of this discourse, as I have tried to show here, is bad faith. We were further along. We had accepted that the gays are good. We had accepted that gay marriage is a good thing. We had accepted that the planet would be burning and we need to do something about it. We were further along. Bad faith actors from the right have shifted the discourse back. And in that arena where a lot of bad faith is being pushed around, where we talk about intellectualism instead of intelligence, where we talk about just asking questions instead of making clear-cut statements. In these times, having a direct message is the only solution. We can't play I'm just asking questions. We can't play the concern game of the right. It helps them. It doesn't help anyone who wants a better world. So we need direct messages to counter that, which is possibly the second part of why right now we need to fantasize with the hammer, to be clear in what we want, in what we need, and doing it. And the third part is, of course, the world sucks. If you're an artist, if you're an artist who thinks that our planet is burning, we need to do something about it. If you're an artist who thinks that people that are not white deserve the same rights and deserve maybe some reparations for what has been done to them under colonialism, imperialism, and so forth. If you think that queer and trans people have the same rights and should have the same lives as everyone else, right now you are angry. And here's the thing, and I know this for myself, an angry heart creates angry art. That's just how it is. You're pissed. I'm pissed. Most of us are pissed about how the world is going to hell. No one's doing anything about it because the libs are too slow to do anything or don't want to get involved because they're too high and mighty. And the fascists are winning. And that makes us angry. And that anger needs to go somewhere. And I'd rather have that anger go into good art that helps some people along the way than just go nowhere or into just a few arguments online. And this is why we need to fantasize with the hammer. All right, these have not been arguments or not questions, but here's my point. Science fiction has not gotten more direct in its messaging. It will never get more direct because it has always been direct in its messaging. When we think this is not the case, we need to examine our own prejudices. We need to examine why we think that is the case. I have laid out one argument why I think that is the case, and I think it's a wrong argument. I think the answer is have more direct fantasy, have more direct fiction. Go back, read Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. It's exactly the kind of book we need right now. And I'm happy it exists. And I want more of it. Anyway, these are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Let's have a bit of a discussion. And I'll be back sometime very soon. And until then, thanks and cheers.